On the 8th of September 1999, exactly at 3:37 p.m., the school bus stops at the intersection of a country road and a dirt path leading to the old farm of the B family. 8-year-old Emily gets off the bus and disappears in the gap between this point and her home, just 400 meters from the stop location. She was never seen again by any person. The investigative team arrives 2 hours after the parents' call. The police report records 3 initial clues. First, a clear, fresh tractor tire print on the dusty roadside. Second, a small piece of grey industrial tape firmly stuck to a dry bush by the road. And third, a single dark hair with preserved root, found 5 meters from the road, right at the edge of the thickets. None of these clues receives detailed evaluation or special attention during the first inspection. The residents of the small town of Black Hills begin whispering even before the police arrive. They immediately identify 2 possible suspects. The first is a neighboring farmer named Joseph Miller, 52 years old, who, by his own account, saw Emily at the moment she got off the bus. He was the last to confirm her presence on the road at that time. Miller claims he was in the field and saw Emily walking alone on the road, but noticed nothing suspicious. The second became a road mechanic, whose name was not yet known to all locals at that time. His old GMC, covered with rust and dirt, passed by the bee farm approximately 10 minutes after the bus left the stop. This fact was confirmed by witnesses from the other end of the road. The GMC driver did not stop, and as was later established, headed toward the neighboring town where he was called for road surface repair. In the first hours of the investigation, the police decide to work in both directions simultaneously. Both witnesses arouse suspicion. Both turn out to be the first whom the detectives interrogate. Based on the tire print, which clearly matched Joseph Miller's tractor model, the police isolate the neighboring farmer for thorough interrogation. Miller voluntarily agrees to take a polygraph test and allows the police to inspect his equipment. For 6 hours, he is repeatedly questioned about the circumstances of that day. Statements are checked. They try to discover contradictions. In the town, rumors spread quickly. Residents are almost certain of his guilt. The obviousness and simplicity of the version captivates locals. The tractor, the print, the neighbor who saw everything last. However, not a single clear proof of the farmer's involvement appears. The polygraph also shows contradictory results, giving no reason to either accuse or completely exonerate Miller. Suspicion hangs in the air, but the police are gradually forced to ease pressure on the farmer, having insufficient grounds for arrest. The investigation sharply changes direction on the evening of the same day. At 11:45 p.m., a phone call comes from the State Criminology Laboratory. The DNA expert reports that the hair found at the disappearance site belongs neither to Joseph Miller nor to the road mechanic with the GMC. Moreover, it belongs to an unknown woman whose genetic profile is absent from the federal database. The entire preliminarily constructed version begins to fall apart right before the investigators' eyes. Versions collapse. Time runs out. It is time to check those who were considered clean. On September 8th, on the day of Emily's disappearance, neighboring farmer Jacob L., 54 years old, suddenly disrupts his usual work schedule. Instead of the usual daytime routine in the fields, he hurriedly goes to the local shop for a new tractor chain. None of the neighbors recall Jacob making urgent purchases at such a time of day before. It is precisely this deviation that attracted the investigation's attention. Initially, Jacob claimed clearly and unambiguously in his testimony. He simply drove past Emily and did not engage in any contact with her. However, on the second interrogation, a day after the first testimony, he suddenly changes his story. The farmer acknowledges a fact that completely contradicts the initial version. He stopped near Emily and offered to give at least her backpack a ride. According to Jacob, Emily refused and quickly walked further. He did not insist and drove away. Investigators instantly record this inconsistency and note it as an important detail for further verification. The investigator thoroughly studies the circumstances of Jacob's trip to the shop for the chain. To the direct question of why the farmer suddenly changed route and went to the shop precisely at this time of day, Jacob confidently answers, "The tractor was slipping. Work in the field stopped." Checking the logs of the local repair station confirms the fact of Jacob's request for a new chain. However, the time of the repair record unexpectedly coincides almost minute by minute with the moment of Emily's disappearance. The perfect coincidence arouses investigators' suspicion. Perhaps the farmer specifically provided himself an alibi by making such an unusual trip precisely when it would be most difficult for the investigation to verify him. Nevertheless, fact is fact. The tractor indeed required urgent repair, which is confirmed by independent testimony from the station mechanic. The investigation faces a conflict of facts. On one hand, suspicious time coincidence; on the other, objective evidence of equipment malfunction. To confirm suspicions, the police employ a service dog trained to work with scent traces. The tracking dog confidently and quickly picks up Emily's weak scent from Jacob's boots, which the farmer voluntarily provided to investigators. However, further examination by the state criminology laboratory brings an unexpected result. Not one of the DNA particles found on the farmer's shoes matches Emily's genetic profile. These results put the investigation in an even more uncomfortable position. Despite obvious signs of possible contact, the investigation has no real proof that Jacob is involved in the disappearance. Thus, suspect number 1 again finds himself in a suspended state. There is evidence, but it is insufficient for bringing official charges. The investigation is forced to leave him at an intermediate stage of verification and engage in other directions of investigation. The decisive evidence appears unexpectedly for everyone, 3 days after Emily's disappearance. Police officers reviewing surveillance camera recordings from the local rural shop find an image of Jacob's tractor. The time on the recording shows Jacob's tractor at the store entrance precisely at 3:55 p.m. This means that just 18 minutes after the bus dropped Emily off on the road, Jacob was already at the other end of the village. The police conduct measurements and confirm. Considering the distance and technical capabilities of the tractor, Farmer Jacob physically could not have managed to commit anything unlawful toward Emily and then appear at the shop in such a short time interval. The video recording becomes the most important evidence in his favor, finally removing the main suspicions of the investigation. The farmer is ruled out, but the victim's family secrets surface in old bills. The investigation switches from Farmer Jacob to more personal affairs of the B family. During a house search conducted a week after Emily's disappearance, in an old closet in the parents' bedroom, detectives discover a stack of unpaid bills, neatly hidden under folders with land papers. The family's total debt amounts to an impressive sum of $18,000. The debt was owed to a company that handled the irrigation system on the farm. During the conversation with detectives, Emily's mother remembers one inconspicuous detail that previously seemed insignificant. In the spring of the same year, in March 1999, a technician from the Great Plains Irrigation Company worked on their farm. He was rather rude and reluctant to make contact. The mother even kept a copy of the pipe delivery receipt, where a barely legible signature appeared. G. Miles. At that time, no one in the family paid attention to this fact. The worker simply did his job and soon left, leaving behind only irritation and an unpaid bill. The investigation notes this name in their materials, but does not specifically focus attention on it. For now, this is simply a person connected with unpaid bills and the B family's irritation. No one suspects how important this connection will become in the near future. However, the next police conversation with Emily's father brings an unexpected turn. When asked if he knows the Great Plains Irrigation Company technician, the father confidently states that he has never seen or communicated with this person personally. The investigators provide him with a copy of the pipe acceptance document, on which his signature is clearly visible next to that same blurred signature, G. Miles. The father, noticeably surprised by this fact, cannot give a clear answer and only states that he possibly signed the papers automatically without looking at the worker's face and without communicating with him directly. Thus, the investigation faces another internal contradiction requiring additional study. Someone in the B family is clearly not telling everything, and details that previously seemed like trifles are beginning to form a disturbing picture of possible reasons for Emily's disappearance. The temporary attention of the police completely switches to Emily's father. The investigation's logic is simple and understandable. Impressive debt, a conflict situation with the contractor, and obvious contradiction in testimony. All this makes the father a potentially vulnerable link. Detectives work on the version that financial problems and conflict relations could lead to Emily's disappearance as a way to pressure the family, force them to pay the debt, or simply take revenge for unpaid bills. However, upon more detailed verification of this version, the police again reach a dead end. Over several days, investigators check the father's bank accounts, carefully study his phone calls and personal contacts. Soon it becomes clear. Besides the unpaid debt, the father has no other real motives for crime or connection to Emily's disappearance. The bills were in the process of being resolved, and the father himself had no direct contacts with company representatives except for that strange signature, the origin of which he could not explain. A week after futile attempts to find evidence against the father of the B family, detectives conduct a meeting with the accountant of the Great Plains Irrigation Company. During the conversation, a new important detail emerges. All the problematic bills of the B farm were supervised by the same installer, who was responsible for direct execution and maintenance of work on the site. But the strangest thing is that this very employee was fired before September 1999. According to the accountant, the dismissal was connected with some internal problems, the exact details of which are unknown to her. The name of this employee on the documents was intentionally crossed out with a black pen, which did not allow the investigation to immediately establish the identity of the dismissed installer. All that is known so far, the person who had direct relation to the B family and the debt no longer worked at the company at the time of Emily's disappearance. The investigation had to return again to the firm's archives and documents to establish who is hiding behind the crossed-out name, and why exactly this employee found himself at the center of the complicated story of Emily's disappearance. The name is erased, but old pager logs keep the roots. The investigation reaches a dead end for many years. Only more than 2 decades later, in 2021, the Cold Case DNA program, aimed at solving old and unsolved cases with the help of modern technologies, takes up for restudy that same single hair initially found glued to gray industrial tape. Now forensic scientists are able to extract a complete nuclear DNA profile, a significant leap forward compared to the limited capabilities of 1999. The obtained DNA profile is promptly uploaded to the genealogical database system, including the widely known GED match platform. After several weeks, the search result leads investigators to a completely new direction. The profile points to distant relatives, a third cousin branch of the Miles family residing in Oklahoma State. This result becomes the first concrete indication of the circle of people with whom the owner of the found hair is potentially connected. Detectives carefully study all available family trees and genealogical connections. Having clarified the line of inheritance, they gradually narrow the list of possible suspects to 3 men who fit the age and could have had the physical possibility of being in Nebraska in 1999. Glenn Miles, Cody Miles, and Thomas Miles. The name Miles had already appeared earlier in the case materials, which immediately attracts the investigation's attention. Now the investigation concentrates on these 3 men. Investigators study their biographies, old addresses, workplaces, and any available records for September 1999. Thanks to police archive records and tax authority databases, it becomes clear that of the 3 candidates, only 1 person officially worked on Nebraska territory during Emily's disappearance period. This is Glenn Miles. Company documents that serviced irrigation systems in the region confirm that Glenn specifically performed tasks for installing and repairing equipment on farms near the B family's home. This selection logic immediately makes Glenn the main suspect, although detectives intentionally avoid hasty conclusions. The other two relatives, Cody and Thomas, have no confirmed connections to the region and never worked there officially. Nevertheless, the police act according to instructions and are obligated to check all three to the end. FBI agents travel to Oklahoma, where Cody Miles voluntarily agrees to provide a sample of his DNA. The samples are sent to the laboratory, where it quickly becomes clear. Cody's DNA does not match the profile obtained from the hair on the tape. This is another unsuccessful turn of the investigation, distracting the investigation from the correct path and temporarily slowing the pace. Cody Miles drops out of the suspect list, and attention returns to Glenn, although detectives do not exclude checking Thomas Miles, which also soon proves fruitless. Thus, the investigation again finds itself facing the necessity to prove or disprove the involvement of the last remaining candidate, Glenn Miles, and only him alone. Concentrating exclusively on Glenn Miles, investigators find his old automobile, a Ford pickup truck from 1988, stored in the backyard of one of his relatives in Oklahoma. The automobile had stood motionless for almost 2 decades, covered with a thick layer of dust, rust, and cobwebs. During detailed examination of the body and cabin, the investigation team discovers a fastening strap that had gotten lost in the trunk among a pile of old junk and tools. Laboratory examination establishes that this strap has barely visible fibers of brown fabric, the structure and color of which exactly match the official uniform that Emily was wearing on the day of her disappearance. This is the first physical evidence directly connecting Glenn Miles to the girl's disappearance. From this moment, Miles officially transitions from the category of potential suspects to a figure directly connected with the incident.